Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back looking at the stuff which was passed to development in June, and now we're going to have a look at the vehicles portion. Now before we start, I just want to say thank you to A Adorable Cat for actually writing this post, something I didn't mention in the last one and I definitely should have. So I apologize for that, but still, credit is where credit's due. It's a lot of work to set up, a post like this, so 4 months ago, well done, and I hope you're, still around actually making posts like this because they're very informative. Anyway, let's get started. The first one is the Panzerkampfwagen 38T-NA, and I can't find a lot of information on this one. Basically, what it seems to be is an upgraded version of the Panzer 38 with an upgraded engine, a little bit of upgraded armor, and some new systems. The main thing, though, is the gun seems very similar, and it seems to be an effort to, or a prototype effort to upgrade the Panzer 38T. You've got to remember, during the French campaign, there was a lot of vehicles such as the Panzer IIIs, Panzer IVs, Panzer IIs, and Panzer Is, with either the short 37s or the 20mm that were seen as, getting to the end of their lifespan. And I feel like the Panzerkampfwagen 38T was probably getting there too, so they were trying to upgrade it in any way they could. It seems like they weren't successful, or unless I feel like we would have seen a lot more of these during the war, but the main thing is, if it existed, sure. The problem is, I'm finding it, I can find that it exists, I just can't find the differences with it. Basically, it seems like they've tried a bunch of different new engines, a little bit of different armor plating, so overall, sure. If you can find definitive data on it, let's get it in the game. The Panzer 38s are fun. The next one is from my Waffenträger, and she talks about adding the Brummbär and the Sturm. This is a rough one. The Sturmmotorwagen, I think is how you say it. But basically it's talking about an SPG line for the Germans, which is designed to just kill pillboxes or just annihilate anything in front of them. She also talks about a few vehicles here, such as the VK302, which I don't know why it's not allowing me to see it, but there's this one, the 105, which looks ridiculous. I'm guessing that this is just a wrong website. Let's go to the Marders. I believe we have the Marder 3 SH in game. I'm not sure about that though. But the whole thrust behind this is to get more tank destroyers or SPGs, depending on how you want to see them, in game. So machines like this, which are very similar to stuff like the NATO, this as well, with its large area to actually hold troops, and then a not secure Panzernetz thing, which doesn't seem to want to load. Also the Sturm Tiger, of course. So yeah, I mean, any vehicles which were built, prototypes were ready and used, I mean they don't have to be used, but that's also nice, I think would be good additions to the game. And most of these, or the majority of these, were built, were tested, and therefore would be lovely to see. Obviously the Sturm Tiger and the Sturm Panzer, the Brummbär, I mean we have the Brummbär in game now, but a lot of people have been asking for the Sturm Tiger for a long time. I personally think it would be kind of useless in game, but it would be nice to have as some kind of gift vehicle. The next one is just an array of vehicles that we could add to the German premium tree. A lot of these are German focused. Not in this, well, obviously in this particular post, but a lot of these posts, and a lot of them I'm going to call out for just being straight ridiculous, but this one I do agree with. So this is basically going through a lot of the different designs, I think would be the best way of putting it, for German premiums. So you've got the Flak Panzer T34, basically a T34 with a different, with the turret taken off, with a turret with 4 20s on it. So obviously an up-armored, AA machine, kind of like the Type 65 in a way, with its T34 hull. Then you've got stuff like the VK301H, which is this machine here, the VK3601H, which I'm pretty sure didn't fully, grasp reality. You have stuff like this, the 105mm Lect Feldhalbitz, the Waffenträger-Geschützwagen, and also stuff like the Jagdpanzer Su-85, which is obviously all these are Soviet vehicles, so captured vehicles, and then you have a little bit of odd stuff. So if you haven't heard, let's see if this actually loads, because a lot of these links are from like 3 to 4 years ago, so normally they're not great at loading. Yeah, it works, okay. So, this machine here, so the Panzer V Panther aus D1, it's basically a Panther hull with a Panzer IV turret. A lot of people say it was a command vehicle, and everything that I've read, it seems like it was designed as a test vehicle and then used later as a command vehicle, because obviously with the way that the turret wing worked, the Panzer IV turret on top was stationary. You know, it wouldn't be able to move side to side. So in-game, I would hope that would be replicated, so therefore it would be nice to see this vehicle in-game, but also with a stationary turret. So you also have stuff like the Baguette-Panzer mit Ausgeschütz or Ausgesetzen, Panzerkampfwagen Vorturm aus Befehlspanzer. Don't you just love German names? And unfortunately, that doesn't exist. So also the Löwe, which we'll get into in a little bit, and then some other nations' tanks such as the Skoda T-15, the VK-1602 Leopard, which everybody goes on about, would be nice to see. The 44M TAS, of course. I believe it was the... Where was the TAS from? Was it Hungarian or was it Romanian? I can't remember which one, but anyway, yes, the 44M TAS. I hope eventually we do get the Romanian and Hungarian trees at some point, and also some more Czechoslovakian stuff. I think overall, this list that you see before you, I mean, some have already been added to the game, like the Panther M10 and the Panzer aus H2. I believe this has actually been added, right? Let's see. Which one's the H2? Oh, the H2 is the one with the 105, never mind. We'll talk about that in a sec, because I'd say another one. Because, as I said, a lot of these posts are German posts, and I have no idea why. Maybe the German community is huge on the forums. Who would have thunk it? It's been like way for 5 years. I'm not going to get into it. Anyway, so the next one is don't simulate the quality of German late war armor. So there was a big stink a few years ago because it was found, or Gadget admitted it, where they basically said, look, we do take into account the quality of the metal used on these machines. And this got a lot of German tankers annoyed because for some reason there's a superiority complex going on there, and they believe that their steel or their metal was the best in the war, and therefore why the hell are they subject to quality thickness percentages, basically. And the issue is everybody else is also subject to these, but the only people who complain about it is the Germans, and I have no idea why. But I believe this got changed at least maybe a year ago at this point, and I still think we do have this in game, but I'd have to check. I know for a fact that the effect that it has is a lot less than it used to be. But yeah, I believe quality should be simulated. I believe this game should be as realistic as possible when it comes to armor, damage, and also guns. So yes, you should simulate the quality of metals which were used. Which means, yes, Germans, you aren't going to get as good armor as it says. Unlucky. The next one is a suggestion for the Patton II to replace the Panther II. So a lot of people, for a very long time, this was actually, I believe, before Americans were even introduced, when the Panther II was added to the German tree, which was literally from release, you had people complaining about it. And I was one of those people. A lot of other people were the same because, well, it's a completely fictional vehicle. Every facet of it is fictional, and we have a suggestion which literally goes through every major part of it and how it's fictional. But people were always thinking about, okay, well, how do we get a vehicle which will be as good as it or replace it? Now, for me, it's simple. Leopard prototypes. Chuck me a Leopard prototype with a 90 on it. Done deal. Just don't give it heat FS. Done. but a lot of people went down the American route, because obviously the Germans did use American vehicles, such as the M47, and that's what you're seeing before you. Now instead, the Germans got an M47 Premium, so we're probably not going to be able to see this as a replacement for the Panther II, but we do have that M48, which I suppose is way too high BR for that. I still am in favour of a Leopard 1 prototype to replace it. The next one is an interesting one. So we're talking about the Centurion Mark 5/1. This is the RAAC, Royal Australian Armoured Regiment. The Centurion Mark 5, at least the Australian one, had the same 84mm that we see on the Mark 3. It had some upgraded armour on it, also some upgraded optics, and a 50 caliber ranging gun. This one was actually used in Vietnam by the Australians, and the idea is to make this a premium for the British tree. I think that's a good idea. I do like the idea of having a Commonwealth tree where these vehicles would be shown in the actual tech trees, but as a compromise, yes, I would be fine having this as a British premium. We don't actually have the Cent Mark V in game. We have the Centurion Mark V Avery, but we don't have just the Mark V itself, so it would be a nice addition. The next one is this one. This is the actual one I was talking about before. So this one is talking about a more historically accurate Panther II. Yeah, more historically accurate of a machine that never existed. So I've talked about a lot of the times that the Panther II that we have in game is completely fictional. The reason for this is because the turret that it uses is completely fictional, therefore the gun that it uses is completely fictional, and on top of this, the engine is too powerful for what it is because the turret and the gun are bigger, therefore Gaijin had to compensate for the heavier vehicle with more horsepower. On top of this, the transmission and the gears is also fictional, plus the optics on it are also pretty much fictional. So everything about it is fictional, not just its gun. A lot of people point to the 88 and they're like, well, you know, I get that's fictional, but maybe they could have upgraded it. Yeah, sure, what about everything else? Basically, the way to look at it is, you know, the last Panther we have in the line, I believe it's the Panther F, that was the turret that was supposed to go on the Panther II, with the 75 on it, so not an 88. So if you took the current Panther II that we have in game, you add the Panther F turret and a 75, you knock its engine down to the Panther F engine, now we're talking. Now we're cooking with gas. And that's pretty much what this is going through. You know, the different design proposals which were for the Panther II. There was no mention of an 88. There was no mention of anything like this. Something you've got to remember. Maybe this is a problem with war games, like video games, but if you read the reports of the Panther tank and the Tiger tank, the Panther tank massively outshone the Tiger, and this was because of its speed, it was because of its angles, it was also because of its gun. Its gun could penetrate more than the Tiger's gun, so if it came up against a heavier target, it could deal with it better than the Tiger. They tried to compensate with this with the Tiger II. The problem with the Long 88 is it cost too much and it wasn't as easy to manufacture, and it was more prone to breaking than, guess what, the 75. So they actually made a ton more 75s. That's why when we last looked at these past to development stuff, they were trying to basically finagle a Panther turret on top of a Tiger, because they wanted to use the 75. They didn't want to use the 88. The 88 to them was too big. It was too well, not useless, but why would you need that large of a gun? It wasn't as if, you know, the British were making a mouse. You know, the 75 could deal with everything that was being thrown at it. Everything on the Western Front. Maybe if the war had gone on for a little bit longer, and, you know, there was more IS-3s, there was more, you know, maybe IS-4s, IS-6s, even maybe an IS-7. Who knows? Like, yes, maybe the argument could be had that, yeah, it wouldn't have been as impactful, and maybe it would have been better to go down the Long 88. But guess what? That didn't happen. The war ended in 1945, and because of this, even by the end of the war, the 75mm from the Germans mounted on the Panther was seen as a better gun than the 88 by the Germans. Otherwise, they would have made more 88s. Simple as. But no, they decided to go down the 75 line. So, for the Panther II, as I said, there is literally nothing linking the 88 to the 75. To the Panther II. So for me, you either try and create what is supposed to be the Panther II, or you just take it out of the game and forget about it and put something else in. I understand. A lot of people are fine with these fictional vehicles. I'm not one of those people, and that's okay, right? I'm not okay with any fictional vehicles, whether it's American, German, Soviet, British, Japanese, Italian, French. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in vehicles that nations either didn't use or didn't build. I'm not interested in paper designs. Right now, the Panther II that we have in War Thunder is a paper design where the paper design didn't exist. Do you see why it is such a crux for a lot of people? Because there is no argument for it being there unless you just want fantasy stuff. And if you want fantasy stuff, I can point you towards a lot of British designers and a lot of American designers who came up with some wacky stuff. Anyway, moving on. We have, should the optics be changed on the Panther II to allow full gun depression? Obviously, on the hull, it has the lights, which get in the way. One of the funny things about the Tiger when it was released, before it got its updated model, it had the big headlights, and your gun used to get stuck on them. Now, the Panther II, it isn't as bad on the Panther II, but if the lights are pretty much unusable, which they are, because you can't turn them on, then I'd just take them off. I mean, why does it matter? You might as well just slap like 100mm more armor on the damn thing. Just balance it as you want. It's not like anything else is going to change. Ooh. Anyway. I just don't like talking about the Panther II. I wish it was gone. The mouse should get the V2 turret. Now, this is something that was talked about for a long time. I believe, after talking to a few people, because personally I haven't really looked into it completely myself, but what I have talked to others about is the fact that the mouse turret is missing about 20mm of armor on the front of it, which would change it from 220 to 240, and therefore, it should be changed. And also, the IS-4M, the IS-3, they had heat trials on them, which would have been hilarious. Now, you've got to remember when this suggestion was made, 2015. So in 2015, this is before a lot of the other ground forces we have, and also this is before a lot of the machines which are now above the mouse. So a lot of people were going, well, my S4 can't do dick against a mouse, so what's going on here? And it seems like at the time they were like, well, just give them heat. I mean, there technically was, heat rounds for these machines, but it's, once again, Gaijin themselves have said that they use ammunition to balance vehicles, right? So they will take away or they will gain ammunition types depending on the balance of the vehicle themselves, as long as they use them in real life. So a lot of the times, a lot of people will point towards specific vehicles using specific rounds and then them not getting them into the game. Well, that's for balance reasons. So that's basically what you're seeing here. The mouse with the V2 turret, though, yes, I definitely would agree that it should get its extra 20mm. I mean, it doesn't really matter now with everybody slinging heat, but it still should be at least somewhat historically accurate. The next one is the addition of a Chinese-Taiwanese ground forces idea to the international clients. Obviously, I did a set of vehicles, maybe 2 weeks ago now, looking at all the Chinese vehicles, all of their information, and these are all the vehicles that are different in the Chinese client when it comes to ground forces compared to the rest. As you can see, at the time of writing this, which was January 2017, you can see there's a bunch of vehicles which I didn't cover because they're literal copies. So T-3485 D5T, PT-76, Su-76M, T-26, BT-5, this is the Hargo 95. So there isn't really much point to covering them because they're already in, the international clients. What a lot of people have been asking for, and me as well, I would like to see a Chinese tech tree. The problem with putting a tech tree and calling it Chinese and Taiwanese, I mean, the two areas don't exactly get along. There is let's call it a frictious relationship between them. And putting them, it would be kind of, I would liken it to putting the Chinese tree in the Japanese tree. I think it would be quite an insult to specific nations. So I would, if you are going to put both in, I think you split it up, or you just, you either split it up into two separate tech trees, with one being a minor one, like I've talked about before. Like, I don't think, as we go forward with nation tech trees, we don't need every nation to have rank 1 to 6 vehicles. This is a point I made for the Japanese, when they were coming out. We don't need everything to have top tier. We don't need everything to have bottom tier. What we need is stuff to start off, maybe in rank 2 or 3 if they can't start at bottom tier of rank 1, and maybe some only go up to rank 3, or only go up to rank 4. And that's okay. Not everything has to have top tier vehicles. The world is not a balanced place, and that is something that we must pretty much replicate in War Thunder. We cannot balance each nation, across the board completely. So when it comes to the Chinese, or the Romanian, or the Hungarian, or the Taiwanese, it sounds interesting, but as long as we change the rules a little bit, so we don't need, rank 1 vehicles, or we don't need rank 6 vehicles for every nation. So yeah, simple as that, really. When it comes to Taiwanese, the only massive difference is you have stuff like this, the M41D, which is obviously a bulldog. I do not want to play through another bulldog, so yeah. That's just a personal thing, though. Should these trees be added? Yes. Next one. Another one of those wonderful German vehicles. So, if you don't know, in 1941 and 1942, basically after the Tiger and the Panther project were well underway, the Germans wanted to change pretty much everything else. So we're talking about the Panzer III, Panzer IV, a lot of the tank destroyers, and even the heavies. So this is where the E50, E75, E100, Mouse, stuff like that came out of, the designs. There was also some other ones, such as the Löwe. Now, a lot of people like the Löwe, and I think that's mainly down to games like World of Tanks. I think it's mainly down to Men of War, where there's a lot of mods which have the Löwe in it. But understand, it never existed. This is not a machine, once again, that existed, and some of the ideas around the Löwe are completely insane. So the first thing is that the gun that was going to be used on it is the 105mm L70. So pretty much the Tiger II 105 gun, right? There's also, technically, a design for one which would house the 150mm. 150. How about no? It also was supposed to have 1,000 horsepower. It was also supposed to have heavily angled stuff like 100mm of armor on the front of it. As you can see, angled very steeply. So what you're talking about is a new heavy tank. So 140mm front, or 100 in some areas, 100mm side armor. You know why I don't like machines like this in game? It's the same reason why I don't like rank 6. I don't like statistics that I can't check. People are bringing up a lot of bug reports right now for rank 6 vehicles. And they can all just be disregarded because it is either confidential or it is Gaijin's interpretation. We saw this with the Challenger tank. If you go and read the historical news article where they talked about the Challenger, the main stuff they talked about was the export versions of the Challenger and their testing of them. This is not the Challenger that we have in-game. On top of this, when they did the Type 90 historical look, what they did is they based it a hell of a lot off the prototype, the STC. So a lot of people have claimed that the Type 90 we have in-game is more like the STC than the actual Type 90. But guess what? We will never know, because the information at this moment in time is classified. So for me, when I look at vehicles like that, it is up to interpretation. And because of this, you cannot submit bug reports. You can submit bug reports, but you can't submit historical reports. So if you have an issue with a vehicle and you think it's unhistorical, it can be hand-waved away with, it is classified, this is our interpretation. You know why I don't like vehicles like the Löwe? Exact same reason. It was never built. It was never really tested since it wasn't built. Some of the components were built, such as the 105 and the engines, but the problem with it is, let's say there's an issue with it. Let's say it has crazy gun depression. Let's say its acceleration is off the charts. Gaijin just turn around and say, this is our interpretation of what it was supposed to be like. And there's nothing you can say. With a Sherman, right, if the speed's off, or if the acceleration's off, or if the gun or the ammunition is acting a bit wonky, you can make historical bug reports about it and it will be fixed. With this, no. Because it's their interpretation. This is why I don't like paper vehicles. It's just why I don't. You can't fix them if they're broken. And basically it just turns into, instead of a historical game, it just turns into a way of basically balancing fictional tanks. Because guess what? A lot of the designs which didn't work, the designers would promise a lot. And once that design was created, you would find issues. Go and have a look at the B-1 Biss's production, or the Sherman's production, and all of the variants where they tried to upgrade the Sherman over time. What you will find is manufacturers and designers going, oh, let's try this crazy idea and see if it works. And then it doesn't work. Or there's a hidden problem that they didn't think about. Guess what happens when you apply that to the Löwe, or when you apply that to some of the crazy German jets? When you apply that to Blom and Voss, with some of their X-Wings, and Starfighters, they might as well be. You know what happens? It doesn't. There is no, oh, we found this issue with the design. Because the design never existed, it was never tested. So therefore you can just hand wave it away and just say, well, if it worked, this is how it would work. And this is my whole problem with the damn thing. You cannot complain about it. You can complain about it from a balance point of view, but from a historic point of view, it's fictional. So you can't do anything about it. That's why I will never advocate stuff like this. The Löwe, I will never advocate for stuff such as, the Hori production, or any of the ridiculous Messerschmitt designs in 1945, which deserve, to be in like the 50s or 60s, and anything like that. I'm just not interested. So no, go away, Löwe. The next one, T-64 prototypes. This makes a lot more sense. Obviously, with the T-64 in game right now, this was made, I believe, before the T-64s were added, so this guy was ahead of his time. Obviously, the Object 430 is the T-64 prototypes. Yeah, sure, let's chuck them in. I mean, why not? What's going to happen? You're going to screw up 10-0 even more? I mean, it is how it is. Just stick them at 9-3 and 9-0 and watch them get dragged up into 10-0 constantly. And then people will complain. The next one is actually a pretty cool one. So this is looking at the British Extended Ground Forces tech tree made by Dol Hades. This is pretty much looking at, and obviously there's a team here, this is pretty much looking at different vehicles that you could add to the British tree. Funny enough, they all existed. Isn't that wonderful? And they were all tested. Wow, what a novel prospect, Germans. Anyway, so we have interesting stuff like the Centaur, the Cavalier, basically a lot of the cruiser tanks which aren't in the game right now, Covenanter, which a lot of people personally, they don't like, or they don't see the point in, but I personally think they should be added. Also the Challenger as well. The Challenger Stage 1, it had a pleek armor on it. Then you have stuff like, obviously, the Centurion Mark II, Centurion Mark V, hopefully they get added to the game at some point. Then you have the Mark V-2, which had the upgunned L7, then the Mark X, which of course we pretty much have, and then Chieftains, FVs, all of these wonderful stuff. Remember, this is all of the vehicles before we had rank 6. Like, you've got to remember when this was created. It was created in 2016, so that's, it was created just before, I believe, we had the announcement of rank 6? No, that was 2017, I believe. So yeah, this was way before then. So yeah, you're not going to have any talk of like the late tier stuff like the Challenger or anything like that. But it's really comprehensive, it's really interesting, and to be honest, if you want to learn about some weird and wonderful British vehicles, and also some other ones, such as some modifications of pre-existing vehicles, give this one a look. It's very, very, very fun to read through. I had a lot of fun.